I won't risk my future for you.
Smart.
Your inheritance could control this crisis.
Then no one can know yet.
Jeremy Reed was 36, a public high school physics teacher in Columbus, Ohio. Anna Whitmore was 34, the celebrated CEO of Whitmore Urban Dynamics, a real estate empire rising faster than anyone expected. Everyone believed Jeremy had married into a life he could never afford. His old Honda packed lunches and faded leather briefcase only reinforced that belief. What they didn't know was that Jeremy had spent years hiding a fortune no headline had ever connected to his name. Then, Anna slid a thick, prenuptial agreement across the polished conference table and said, "I won't risk my future for you." Jeremy smiled, reached for the pen, and signed without changing a single word. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, let me know your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where these stories reach. And if you love slow-burning stories where patience, evidence, and truth matter more than revenge, consider subscribing. Tomorrow's story might be the one you remember the longest. The wedding planners called it one of the most elegant ceremonies Chicago had hosted that spring. Lake Michigan shimmered beneath a cloudless sky as white roses lined the marble walkway leading toward the historic ballroom of the Drake Hotel. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished floors while a string quartet rehearsed softly in the corner. Business leaders, venture capital partners, city officials, and journalists filled the guest list. Most had received handwritten invitations embossed with the Whitmore family crest. Jeremy Reed noticed almost none of it. His attention rested on the small group of students standing outside the hotel entrance. They had recognized him while walking past during a weekend science competition. One of them waved awkwardly. "Mr. Reed?" Jeremy smiled immediately. He stepped away from the photographers, shook each student's hand, and spent nearly 5 minutes asking about their robotics tournament. Inside the ballroom, several executives exchanged puzzled looks. "That's him. The physics teacher. I thought he'd be different." Their voices stayed low, but not low enough. Jeremy heard every word. He simply thanked his students for stopping by before returning toward the ceremony without mentioning the conversation. The contrast between the two families had been obvious from the beginning. Richard Whitmore had spent nearly 40 years building commercial developments across Illinois before selling most of his holdings. Although his daughter often described herself as completely self-made, everyone close to the family understood she had grown up surrounded by opportunity, influential mentors, and financial security. Richard respected hard work above everything else. Money, however, shaped his first impressions. When Jeremy first asked for Anna's hand in marriage, Richard had invited him to dinner at the Union League Club of Chicago. The conversation had remained polite. Too polite. "So," Richard had said while cutting into his steak, "Anna tells me you teach physics." "I do." "How long?" "Almost 12 years. Richard nodded slowly. "And you enjoy it?" "I do." "No plans to move into administration?" Jeremy smiled. "No." "Private schools?" "No." "University?" "No." Richard waited. Jeremy simply sipped his water. Most people rushed to fill silence. Jeremy never had. Across the table, Diane Whitmore watched quietly. She wasn't rude. She wasn't warm either. Finally, she asked, "Teaching isn't exactly a high-paying profession." Jeremy answered with the same calm expression. "It pays enough." Richard chuckled softly. "Enough for what?" Jeremy looked toward Anna before replying. "For the life I want." Richard leaned back. It was not the answer he expected, nor was it the answer he respected. After dinner, when Jeremy had stepped outside to answer a phone call, Richard quietly turned toward his daughter. "He's a decent man." Anna smiled. "I know. But I hope you understand that marriage changes financial responsibilities." Anna nodded confidently. I'll make sure everything is protected. That single sentence stayed with Jeremy far longer than Richard ever realized. Not because it offended him, because it revealed exactly how they already saw him. Anna herself was impossible to ignore. At 34, she had become one of the youngest CEOs featured twice on the cover of Midwest Business Review. Whitmore Urban Dynamics had transformed aging commercial properties into technology-driven mixed-use developments. Investors praised her vision. Podcasts called her one of the brightest entrepreneurs of her generation. She deserved much of that praise. Jeremy never questioned her intelligence. He admired it. What concerned him was how often success was becoming the only language spoken around her. Every celebration eventually became another discussion about valuation. Every vacation turned into networking. Every dinner somehow ended with revenue projections. Jeremy listened more than he spoke. Not because he lacked opinions, because silence often revealed more than conversation. The rehearsal dinner demonstrated that better than anything else. Anna's college friends gathered around a rooftop terrace overlooking downtown Chicago. Champagne flowed freely. Stories grew louder. Someone eventually asked how they first met. Anna laughed. I almost ignored him. Everyone smiled. He was grading lab reports at a coffee shop. Jeremy nodded. That's true. I thought he was a graduate student. You asked if I worked at the university. And you said, Jeremy answered before she could. No, I teach high school. Laughter spread around the table. Anna grinned. I remember thinking, well, that's unexpected. Another executive joined in. So, when did you realize he was the one? Anna looked toward Jeremy. I realized he made me calmer. Jeremy appreciated the honesty. She truly believed it. At least then. The conversation drifted toward finances. Someone asked whether they planned separate accounts. Anna answered confidently. We're getting a prenup. Nobody seemed surprised. One guest lifted his wine glass. Smart move. Another added, You have too much to lose. Jeremy quietly continued eating. Nobody asked what he might lose. Nobody imagined the answer could be larger. Late that evening, Jeremy drove back to Columbus alone. Anna remained in Chicago for meetings with investors. His destination was not glamorous. Jefferson High School sat almost empty on Saturday mornings. The robotics team had qualified for state competition, and Jeremy had promised to help recalibrate one of their autonomous navigation systems. He unlocked the science wing with his faculty key. Dust floated through sunlight, pouring across the laboratory tables. 3 students were already waiting. You actually came, one of them said. Jeremy smiled. I said I would. For nearly 4 hours, they tested sensors, rewrote code, replaced damaged wiring, and laughed every time the machine crashed into a cardboard wall. No reporters, no investors, no luxury hotel. Only students discovering confidence, one successful experiment at a time. Jeremy left the school carrying a small cardboard box filled with broken circuit boards. He stopped at a local grocery store afterward. The cashier recognized him. Still teaching, Jeremy smiled. Monday morning. Thought maybe you'd retire after marrying that CEO? Jeremy laughed softly. I like Mondays. She shook her head. I'll never understand you. Jeremy simply wished her a good afternoon. Back in Chicago, Anna stood before a room filled with institutional investors. The presentation lasted 90 minutes. Projected growth, expansion maps, construction timelines, future acquisitions. Applause followed every slide. One investor stood afterward. You've built something remarkable. Anna accepted the compliment gracefully. I've had good people around me. Another investor smiled. And your husband, Anna answered almost automatically. He keeps me grounded. It sounded affectionate. It was. But there was something else beneath those words. Jeremy grounded her. He simply did not elevate her career. That distinction seemed harmless. For now. The following Monday, both signed paperwork with their wedding coordinator. guest confirmations, transportation schedules, security arrangements, insurance. Then came another envelope. The law firm's logo appeared neatly embossed across the front. Anna looked at Jeremy. "We should probably finish this today." He nodded. "Whenever you're ready." She smiled with complete confidence. "There won't be any problems." Jeremy looked out the office window toward the Chicago skyline. "I don't expect any." Neither of them realized that the document waiting inside the envelope would someday become the strongest protection either of them possessed, but not for the reason Anna believed. Marriage changed Jeremy Reed's address, but it did not change the rhythm of his mornings. Every weekday his alarm sounded at 5:30. By 6, coffee steamed from the same chipped ceramic mug he had owned since graduate school. He packed a turkey sandwich and apple, a small container of almonds, and yesterday's lesson plans into the worn leather briefcase his grandfather had given him on his 25th birthday. The leather had faded around the corners, but Jeremy never considered replacing it. Anna often joked that he could afford a new briefcase if he wanted one. Jeremy always answered with the same smile. "This one still works." She believed he was simply frugal. She never imagined sentiment mattered more than price. Outside their luxury penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago, rows of imported sports cars waited beneath the residential tower. Bentleys, Ferraris, Aston Martins, and custom Range Rovers reflected the morning sun. Jeremy walked past all of them. He climbed into his aging silver Honda Accord. The engine hesitated for a moment before starting. The security guard downstairs greeted him every morning. "Still driving this thing, Mr. Reed?" Jeremy laughed. "It hasn't complained yet. You know your wife could buy you anything." "I know." The guard waited. Jeremy pulled away without saying anything more. He drove nearly 45 minutes each direction because he refused to leave the public school where he had taught for over a decade. Jefferson High School stood in a working-class neighborhood where many students balanced homework with part-time jobs. Some came from single-parent households. Some struggled to afford lunch. Some believed college belonged to other people. Jeremy disagreed every day. His classroom reflected that belief. Old laboratory tables had been repaired instead of replaced. Physics posters shared wall space with handwritten notes from former students. A faded sign above the whiteboard read, "Curiosity is always welcome here." Students arrived early. Some wanted homework help. Others simply wanted somewhere quiet before first period. Jeremy never asked why. One Monday morning, sophomore Ethan Morales entered carrying a broken drone. It stopped flying. Jeremy looked over the damaged propeller. "When?" "Saturday." "What happened?" "I crashed it." Jeremy smiled. "Excellent." The teenager blinked. "Excellent. You learned something." "But I broke it." Jeremy placed the drone on his desk. "Then today we learn why." That was how Jeremy taught. Failure never embarrassed him. Only refusing to learn did. By lunchtime, 3 students surrounded his desk, debating air resistance, while another carefully soldered new wiring beneath Jeremy's supervision. The classroom felt alive. Not because of expensive equipment, because students believed mistakes were allowed. Across town, Whitmore Urban Dynamics occupied 23 floors of a sleek glass headquarters overlooking the Chicago River. Everything there reflected precision. Digital displays tracked market performance in real time. Executives hurried between conference rooms. Investment analysts monitored acquisition targets across multiple states. Anna thrived inside that environment. Jeremy genuinely admired her confidence. He simply never wanted that life for himself. Few people understood why. The answer had begun decades earlier. Jeremy was 12 years old when his grandfather first brought him to Reed Legacy Capital. Unlike modern investment firms filled with open workspaces and digital screens, Reed Legacy occupied an understated limestone building that looked more like an old law office than a financial institution. No company logo covered the entrance. No advertisements appeared online. No interviews appeared in business magazines. Privacy had always been the Reed family's greatest asset. Thomas Reed believed wealth attracted attention. Character attracted trust. Only one of those lasted. Jeremy remembered walking beside his grandfather through quiet hallways lined with black and white photographs. Factories, railroads, warehouses, apartment buildings. Every generation of the Reed family had built something tangible instead of chasing headlines. Thomas eventually stopped beside an old map of the Midwest. "Do you know what this is?" Jeremy studied it. "Our buildings." Thomas smiled. "Our responsibility." The distinction confused 12-year-old Jeremy. His grandfather noticed immediately. "Money isn't ownership." "What is stewardship?" Jeremy never forgot that word. Years later, after graduating from college, every major financial publication assumed Jeremy would eventually become the public face of Reed Legacy Capital. Instead, he shocked nearly everyone. He announced he was becoming a public school teacher. Board members questioned the decision. Financial journalists briefly speculated about family disagreements. There weren't any. Thomas Reed called his grandson into the library of the family's century-old estate. Stacks of financial reports covered the oak desk. Thomas removed his reading glasses. "So," Jeremy smiled nervously. "So, you've made your decision." "I have." "You understand people won't understand." "I know." Thomas remained silent for nearly a full minute. Finally, he walked toward the window overlooking the property, and quietly said, "Good." Jeremy blinked. "You aren't disappointed?" Thomas turned. "If you wanted this job because of obligation, you would eventually resent it." "I don't." "I know." Thomas placed one hand on Jeremy's shoulder. "The family already has people who know how to make money." He paused. "What it needs is someone who remembers why we made it." When Thomas passed away several years later, the transition surprised almost no one inside the organization. Ownership transferred exactly as planned. Operational control, however, did not. Jeremy became principal beneficiary of the Reed Family Trust. Professional management remained in place. Investment decisions continued through independent fiduciaries. Jeremy reviewed long-term strategy. He did not run daily operations. That responsibility belonged to Margaret Collins. Margaret had served Reed Legacy Capital for nearly 25 years. Precise, reserved, exceptionally respected. Every January she met Jeremy inside the same private conference room Thomas had once used. The room overlooked downtown Columbus. No signs identified the building from outside. Margaret entered carrying several leather binders. "Good morning, Jeremy." "Good morning." She organized the documents carefully. "Annual review?" He nodded. For the next 3 hours, they examined commercial real estate holdings across 6 states. Industrial logistics centers, rail infrastructure partnerships, long-term municipal bonds, renewable energy investments, agricultural land leases, private equity positions. Nothing flashy. Everything profitable. Margaret summarized calmly. Conservative estimates place current family assets slightly above $2.4 billion. Jeremy simply nodded. No celebration, no excitement, only responsibility. Margaret had always admired that. Many beneficiaries obsessed over returns. Jeremy always asked different questions. "Any layoffs?" "No." "Environmental compliance?" "Fully current." "Pending litigation?" "None of significance." Only after discussing employees' communities and legal obligations did Jeremy finally ask about financial performance. Thomas would have approved. Margaret closed the final binder. "Everything is in excellent condition." Jeremy smiled faintly. "Good." She looked at him over her glasses. "Anna still doesn't know?" "No." "You've been married almost a year." Jeremy remained quiet. Margaret never pressed personal matters. This time she did. "Will you ever tell her?" Jeremy stared through the conference room window toward the city below. "When the right moment comes." Margaret understood what he truly meant, when trust no longer depended on money. The meeting ended shortly before noon. Jeremy placed the annual reports inside a plain brown envelope. No company logo, no identifying marks. He drove home before stopping at a small fireproof safe hidden behind bookshelves in his study. Inside rested trust documents, family correspondence, and annual reports dating back decades. He carefully locked the new file beside the others. Then he removed tomorrow's physics quizzes from his briefcase. Within minutes, he was grading equations instead of billion-dollar investment portfolios. No one watching him through the apartment window would have imagined that the quiet teacher marking incorrect answers with a red pen legally controlled one of the Midwest's oldest private fortunes. That anonymity was exactly how Jeremy wanted it. Tomorrow morning he would return to Jefferson High School. His students would ask about momentum electricity and orbital motion. None of them would know where he had spent his afternoon. Neither would Anna. And for the moment, Jeremy believed that was exactly how life should remain. The first sign that something was changing did not come from a courtroom. It came from a calendar. Jeremy noticed it one Tuesday evening while preparing tomorrow's physics demonstration on magnetic induction. Anna had promised they would have dinner together. She rarely made promises she could not keep. At 6:15, his phone vibrated. "Running late. Don't wait for me." He smiled faintly. No apology. Just information. Jeremy wrapped the grilled salmon he had prepared for her and placed it in the refrigerator. It happened again 2 nights later, then the following Monday, then almost every week afterward. Whitmore Urban Dynamics had entered what financial analysts called its most aggressive expansion phase. Anna called it opportunity. Her board called it momentum. Investors called it visionary leadership. Inside the company, however, not everyone used such optimistic words. On the 32nd floor of headquarters, Michael Grant studied a spreadsheet that refused to make him comfortable. As chief financial officer, Michael had worked beside Anna for nearly 7 years. He admired her intelligence. He respected her discipline. But numbers had no loyalty. They only reflected reality. The latest acquisition package involved nearly 2,000 acres of industrial property outside Gary, Indiana. On paper, the project appeared brilliant. Former manufacturing land, excellent rail access, interstate connections, state tax incentives, projected profit margins exceeding 30%. Investors loved presentations like these. Michael looked beyond the summary. Environmental remediation estimates had nearly doubled. Groundwater testing remained incomplete. Several independent consultants recommended delaying construction until additional reviews could be finished. Someone had highlighted those paragraphs in yellow. Someone else had written across the margin, "Proceed anyway." Michael already knew whose handwriting it was. He carried the report into Anna's office. She stood before a massive digital screen displaying expansion maps across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. Colored markers represented pending developments. Nearly every county seemed to contain another Whitmore project. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. Michael placed the report on her desk. "We need to talk about Riverside Industrial Park." Anna glanced toward the file without opening it. "What about it?" "The environmental consultants. They're cautious. They're concerned. That's their job." Michael remained standing. "The contamination estimates keep increasing." Anna folded her arms. "The cleanup budget already includes contingencies. They believe additional testing should happen first." She finally opened the report. "I've read it." Michael hesitated. "I think we should delay closing." Silence settled across the office. Outside the glass walls, assistants hurried through hallways carrying laptops and presentation folders. Inside, Anna calmly closed the report again. "We've already announced the acquisition." "I know. If we postpone now, the market will assume something is wrong. Michael answered carefully. What if something is wrong? Anna looked directly at him. Michael, her voice remained calm. We've spent 18 months assembling this expansion strategy. I understand. Competitors are waiting for us to hesitate. They're also waiting for us to make mistakes. Anna walked toward the window overlooking the Chicago River. When people build companies, there comes a point where caution becomes another word for fear. Michael didn't answer immediately. He knew Anna well enough to recognize that once she framed a decision as courage versus fear, changing her mind became nearly impossible. I still recommend postponing. She nodded once. Recommendation noted. The meeting ended. Michael carried the report back to his office. He did not feel relieved. That evening, Jeremy arrived home shortly after 6. Anna was already inside the penthouse, sitting at the dining table surrounded by architectural renderings and financial projections. She looked exhausted. Dark circles had begun appearing beneath her eyes. Her tablet displayed 3 separate video conferences scheduled before 8 o'clock. Jeremy quietly reheated the salmon she had missed several nights earlier. She barely noticed. You didn't have to do that, she said. It only takes a few minutes. She continued reading emails while eating. Jeremy didn't interrupt. Years of teaching had taught him that silence often invited conversation better than questions. Eventually, Anna spoke first. We're acquiring another development. I heard. It'll be our biggest project. Congratulations. She smiled. For once, say something besides congratulations. Jeremy looked up from his own plate. What would you like me to say? I don't know. Do you want advice? She laughed softly. From a physics teacher. Jeremy smiled. You married one. Anna reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I know. For a brief moment, the distance between them disappeared. Then her phone rang. She immediately answered. Anna Whitmore. Jeremy quietly finished dinner alone. By the time the call ended nearly 40 minutes later, his plate had already been washed. Later that week, Anna appeared on a national business television program. Behind her, digital renderings showcased future developments. The interviewer smiled. Your company seems unstoppable, Anna answered confidently. We're only getting started. What allows you to move faster than competitors? Our willingness to make decisions. Investors applauded that answer. Jeremy watched the interview from the teacher's lounge during lunch break. Another teacher looked toward the television. Your wife really knows what she wants. Jeremy smiled. She works very hard. You ever think about joining the company? No. Why not? Jeremy folded his lunch bag. I already have a job I love. The teacher laughed. Most people would trade places with you tomorrow. Jeremy didn't respond. Most people measured success differently. Friday afternoon brought another annual board meeting at Whitmore headquarters. Directors reviewed quarterly growth. Revenue exceeded expectations. Stock prices climbed steadily. Analysts praised expansion. Only one section of the presentation produced visible tension: risk assessment. Michael stood beside the projection screen. Environmental compliance costs have increased across multiple projects. A director interrupted. Temporary. We don't know yet. Another asked. Material. Michael answered honestly. Potentially. Anna spoke before additional questions emerged. Our legal and environmental teams continue evaluating every site. One director nodded. So, no immediate concerns? Anna answered confidently. None that change our strategic direction. Michael looked toward the presentation screen. The sentence was technically accurate. It simply omitted several unresolved uncertainties. He wondered whether omission could eventually become its own kind of problem. Across the city, Jeremy dismissed his final physics class before staying late to supervise the robotics club. One student accidentally burned out a motor. Another knocked an entire prototype off the workbench. Nobody panicked. Jeremy simply asked, "What did we learn?" By 8 o'clock, the students finally left. Jeremy locked the classroom and walked toward the parking lot beneath a fading sunset. His phone buzzed again. Anna. "Hi. You still at school?" "Just leaving." "I'm sorry." "For what?" "I won't be home tonight." Jeremy stopped beside his Honda. "Everything okay?" "Emergency meetings." "Need anything?" There was a pause. "No." "Drive safely." "You too." The call ended. Jeremy stared at the dark screen for a few seconds before placing the phone back into his pocket. He wasn't angry. He wasn't suspicious. Mostly he wondered whether Anna was remembering to take care of herself. Meanwhile, on the 32nd floor of Whitmore headquarters, another meeting had just begun. Only 5 executives remained inside the conference room. The environmental consultants had submitted revised findings. The contamination beneath Riverside Industrial Park appeared significantly worse than originally estimated. Cleanup could delay construction by more than a year. One attorney quietly cleared his throat. "We have 2 options." Everyone looked toward him. "We disclose everything now." He hesitated. "Or, we proceed with closing while additional testing continues." Silence filled the room. Anna slowly closed the report. She reached for a black fountain pen. Then, without another word, she signed the authorization approving the acquisition to move forward despite the unresolved legal concerns. No one spoke. But several people understood they had just crossed a line that could never be erased. By the time autumn arrived, Whitmore Urban Dynamics had become one of the fastest-growing real estate companies in the Midwest. Financial magazines praised Anna Whitmore as an executive who never hesitated. Business podcasts invited her to discuss leadership. Investment conferences competed to feature her as a keynote speaker. Every article repeated the same phrase: bold decisions create extraordinary companies. Jeremy read a few of those articles while drinking coffee before school. He smiled each time he saw Anna's picture. He was proud of her. He simply wished success demanded a little less of her time. Their schedules barely crossed anymore. Most mornings he left before sunrise. Most evenings she returned after dark. Sometimes she was already asleep when he came to bed after grading exams. Other nights he woke briefly at 2 in the morning and found her sitting in the living room answering emails beneath the glow of her laptop. "You should sleep," he would say. "In a minute." That minute usually became another hour. Jeremy never argued. He quietly placed a blanket over her shoulders before returning to bed. One Friday afternoon, Anna called unexpectedly. "Are you busy tomorrow evening?" Jeremy looked up from a stack of laboratory reports. "I promised the robotics team until 4. "What about after that?" "I'm free." "Good. I have a charity gala." Jeremy laughed softly. "You make it sound exciting." "It isn't." "What kind of gala?" "The Whitmore Foundation's annual education fundraiser." Jeremy smiled. "Education. I thought you'd approve." "I already do." She hesitated. "There will be investors." "I assumed so. And reporters." "I assumed that too. You'll wear the navy tuxedo." "I know the one." For the first time in weeks, Anna sounded almost relaxed. "I'm looking forward to spending an evening together." "So am I." Saturday evening transformed Chicago's Museum of Contemporary Art into one of the city's most exclusive fundraising events. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Television cameras captured arriving guests. Crystal lights illuminated towering floral arrangements. Waiters carried silver trays through rooms filled with politicians, philanthropists, CEOs, and celebrities. Jeremy stepped out of the car wearing the same navy tuxedo he had owned for years. It fit perfectly. He saw no reason to replace it. Anna arrived moments later after coming directly from another meeting. She wore an elegant black evening gown that immediately attracted photographers. Flash after flash reflected across polished marble floors. Someone called her name. Another requested an interview. Within seconds, she disappeared into conversations. Jeremy waited patiently nearby. He had grown accustomed to this rhythm. Eventually, Anna returned and slipped her arm through his. Sorry. No need. They always want 5 more minutes. Jeremy smiled. I counted 12. She laughed. Inside the ballroom, conversations flowed effortlessly. Executives discussed acquisitions, attorneys debated regulations, investors compared quarterly performance. Jeremy listened politely whenever someone included him. Most didn't. To many guests, he represented an interesting footnote. Anna's husband, the teacher, nothing more. Richard Whitmore joined them carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. You made it. Jeremy accepted one. Wouldn't miss it. Richard looked around the ballroom proudly. Nearly $3 million raised already. That's impressive. Richard nodded. Business success should create opportunities for others. Jeremy genuinely agreed. It's one reason education matters. Richard smiled politely before another donor approached him. The conversation shifted again. Later during dinner, guests were seated according to donation level. Jeremy found himself surrounded by venture capital partners and commercial developers. One man introduced himself as Leonard Bishop. I hear you're in education. I teach physics. Leonard nodded. My daughter hated physics. Jeremy laughed. Many students say that before they discover rockets. The table chuckled. Another executive asked, Do you ever think about leaving teaching? Jeremy answered exactly as he always had. No. But surely your wife could use someone she trusts. She already has an excellent team. Leonard smiled. Still, it must be strange. What? Being married to someone who makes... Well? He searched for diplomatic wording. Jeremy helped him. Considerably more money than I do. The table laughed awkwardly. Leonard shrugged. You said it. Jeremy smiled. It has never bothered me. Across the ballroom, Anna had begun speaking with several major donors. One of them gestured toward Jeremy. Anna glanced in his direction. She smiled. Then someone asked a harmless question. What does your husband do during all these corporate events? Anna laughed lightly. He probably remains the poorest person at this table. The surrounding group laughed. Most considered it harmless, playful, an affectionate joke. Jeremy heard every word. He stood less than 20 feet away. For a brief second, the room seemed strangely quiet. Not because everyone stopped talking, because Jeremy remembered another sentence. I won't risk my future for you. Different words, same assumption. He calmly lifted his water glass. No anger, no embarrassment. Only a quiet sadness that surprised even him. Anna noticed his expression almost immediately. After the conversation ended, she approached him. You okay? Of course. You've been quiet? I'm listening. She studied his face. You heard what I said. I did. It was just a joke. Jeremy smiled gently. I know. You aren't upset. He looked around the ballroom. No. And he meant it. He wasn't offended by the comment itself. He was troubled by how naturally it had come. Sometimes jokes revealed beliefs people no longer noticed themselves holding. The evening continued. Scholarship recipients thanked donors. A youth orchestra performed. Auction items sold for astonishing prices. Jeremy spent nearly half an hour speaking with a high school senior who dreamed of studying engineering but worried about tuition. He encouraged her to apply everywhere. Don't decide your future before someone else has the chance to. The student smiled. I'll remember that. Unknown to Jeremy, someone else had noticed the conversation. Rachel Bennett. Rachel worked as an investigative journalist for the Chicago Ledger. Unlike entertainment reporters, she rarely attended charity events for celebrity photographs. She came because powerful people often relaxed too much when they believed cameras had stopped watching. She recognized Anna immediately. She also noticed Jeremy spending more time talking with scholarship students than executives. Interesting, she thought. Before leaving, Rachel quietly asked one museum employee, "Who's the man speaking with the students?" "Anna Whitmore's husband." "The businessman?" "No." "The teacher." Rachel wrote 2 words inside her notebook. "Observe him." 3 days later, while Jeremy explained Newton's third law to his sophomore class, Rachel received an unexpected package at the Chicago Ledger offices. No return address, plain brown envelope, no fingerprints visible on the tape. Inside rested a flash drive. Nothing else. Her editor looked toward the envelope. "Anonymous source." "Looks that way." Rachel connected the drive to an isolated newsroom computer. Several folders appeared: property acquisition summaries, internal environmental reports, accounting spreadsheets, email exports. She frowned. Most documents related to Whitmore Urban Dynamics. One folder caught her attention: Riverside Industrial Park. Rachel opened the environmental assessments. The dates didn't match. Several earlier reports contained significantly higher contamination estimates than later public disclosures. She checked another document, then another. Someone had created revised summaries. Someone had removed pages. Her editor walked behind her. "Anything?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. "I don't know yet. But if these documents are authentic..." She leaned closer to the screen. "Someone inside that company is trying very hard to tell a story." Back at Whitmore headquarters, Michael Grant stared at the empty chair across from his desk. The employee who had managed several environmental compliance files had unexpectedly resigned that morning. No explanation, no forwarding address. Human Resources called it personal reasons. Michael wasn't convinced. He opened the company's document management system. Several access logs had been erased, not deleted, overwritten. His stomach tightened. Meanwhile, Jeremy ended another school day helping students prepare for a regional science competition. As they packed their equipment, one student asked, "Mr. Reed." "Yes." "How do you know when you're successful?" Jeremy considered this question carefully. Finally, he smiled. "When the people around you become stronger because you were there." The students nodded thoughtfully. Jeremy turned off the classroom lights and locked the door. Across the city, Rachel Bennett printed the first page of what might become the biggest investigation of her career. She still lacked proof. She still needed verification. But instinct told her the anonymous envelope was only the beginning. Someone had decided it was finally time for the truth to leave the building. Rachel Bennett had learned early in her career that anonymous documents were never enough. Documents could be forged. Emails could be fabricated. Spreadsheets could be manipulated. If she wanted to accuse one of the fastest-growing real estate companies in the Midwest of concealing environmental risks, she needed evidence that would survive both public scrutiny and a courtroom. She began with the simplest question: were the files authentic? For 3 days, she contacted environmental consultants whose names appeared on the reports. Most declined to comment. Several never returned her calls. One finally agreed to meet under one condition: no recording devices. The meeting took place inside a quiet coffee shop nearly 40 miles outside Chicago. The consultant arrived wearing an old baseball cap and sunglasses despite the cloudy afternoon. Rachel slid one printed report across the table. "I only have one question." The man studied the document for several seconds. His face changed. "Where did you get this?" "So it's real." He looked around the room before lowering his voice. "I didn't say that." "You didn't deny it." He remained silent. Rachel pointed toward a highlighted paragraph discussing groundwater contamination. This page doesn't exist in the public filing. The consultant slowly folded the paper. It used to. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. What happened? I don't know. You wrote this report. I wrote an earlier report. And the version submitted publicly wasn't identical. Rachel leaned forward. Who changed it? The consultant stood. I've already said too much. Before leaving, he stopped beside the table. Be careful. Then he disappeared into the parking lot. Rachel never saw him again. Back at the Chicago Ledger, she opened another folder from the anonymous flash drive. Internal email chains, meeting schedules, revision histories. One particular conversation immediately caught her attention. Subject: Riverside Environmental Summary. Several attachments had been exchanged between legal staff project managers and senior executives. Near the bottom of the chain, one sentence stood out. Use revised executive summary only. Rachel frowned. The earlier attachments referenced contamination levels nearly twice as high as those presented to investors. Someone had deliberately simplified the language. Whether that crossed legal boundaries remained uncertain, but it certainly raised questions. Meanwhile, inside Whitmore Urban Dynamics, Michael Grant found himself asking questions of his own. He sat alone reviewing document access logs. The company's information technology director entered quietly. You wanted to see me? Michael nodded. I need every access record connected to the Riverside files. They're already archived. I know. I also know someone deleted several revision histories. The director hesitated. Deleted isn't the right word. What is... They were overwritten. Michael looked up. Can that happen automatically? No. So someone did it manually. The director didn't answer. He didn't need to. Michael understood. Someone inside the company had intentionally removed part of the digital record. He leaned back in his chair. When? About 3 weeks ago. Can you identify the user? Not anymore. Michael closed his eyes briefly. The timing matched almost perfectly with the anonymous package Rachel Bennett had received. He didn't know about the package. He simply knew something significant had left the building. That evening, Jeremy arrived home carrying a cardboard box filled with model rocket parts. His students planned to compete in a statewide engineering challenge. The kitchen lights were off. Anna still hadn't returned. A handwritten note rested on the counter. Emergency board meeting. Don't wait up. Love you. Jeremy smiled sadly. He cooked dinner anyway. Old habits rarely disappeared. While eating alone, he graded physics quizzes. One student had written beneath the final problem, I'm still confused, but I think I'm getting closer. Jeremy circled the sentence instead of the incorrect equation. Then he wrote, That's how learning works. The next morning, his first period class buzzed with unusual energy. Several students had heard about a regional science scholarship. One sophomore asked, Mr. Reed, yes? If someone gives you an opportunity, how do you know whether you deserve it? Jeremy set down his marker. You don't earn opportunities before receiving them. The classroom grew quiet. You earn them afterward. The students wrote the sentence into their notebooks. Jeremy didn't realize those words described his own life better than anyone else's. Across the city, another emergency meeting continued inside Whitmore headquarters. Michael presented updated financial exposure estimates. If environmental remediation expands further, project costs could increase another $80 million. One board member looked shocked. 80? That's a conservative estimate. Another director asked, Can we still proceed? Michael answered honestly. Financially? Yes. Legally. He paused. I can't promise that. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Anna remained composed. We've already invested too much to stop now. Michael looked toward her. Sometimes stopping early costs less. Anna answered quietly. And sometimes hesitation destroys confidence. The room fell silent again. Neither of them raised their voices. Neither of them lost control. But nearly everyone present recognized something had changed. For the first time since joining the company, Michael and Anna no longer viewed risk through the same lens. Later that afternoon, Rachel received another anonymous message. Not another package. An encrypted email. Only one sentence appeared. Look at property transfers connected to Harbor Ridge Holdings. No signature, no explanation. Rachel searched corporate registration records. Harbor Ridge Holdings appeared ordinary. Limited liability company. Recently formed. Minimal public information. Then she noticed something unusual. The company shared mailing addresses with two separate Whitmore subsidiaries. Coincidence, possibly. She kept digging. Meanwhile, Jeremy visited the school library after classes. The robotics team had qualified for another competition, but several students couldn't afford transportation costs. Without mentioning it to anyone, Jeremy quietly paid the remaining balance himself. The librarian watched him fill out the paperwork. You never tell them it's you. Jeremy smiled. It doesn't matter who pays. They'll probably never know. I hope not. She shook her head. You're a strange man. I've heard that before. He left before the students arrived. Recognition had never interested him. That evening, Margaret Collins called unexpectedly. Jeremy rarely received personal calls from the trustee. Good evening, Margaret. Good evening. Everything all right? There are some unusual market rumors. Jeremy listened quietly. About Reed Legacy. No. Whitmore, Urban Dynamics. Jeremy's expression changed. What kind of rumors? Nothing confirmed. She chose her words carefully. Several institutional investors have begun requesting additional environmental disclosures. Jeremy remained silent. Margaret continued. I thought you should know. Thank you. You haven't discussed business matters with Anna. No. Will you? Jeremy looked through the apartment window toward the Chicago skyline. I don't interfere in her company. This isn't ordinary market speculation. I know. Margaret hesitated. Thomas always believed silence had value. Jeremy smiled faintly. He also believed timing mattered. Yes. I hope the timing never comes. After ending the call, Jeremy stood alone in the dark living room. He wasn't worried about money. He wasn't thinking about investments. He was thinking about Anna. She had spent years building Whitmore Urban Dynamics from an ambitious regional developer into a nationally respected company. He knew how much of herself she had invested in it. If something truly threatened the company, it would threaten more than her career. It would threaten the identity she had built around success. Late that night, Anna finally returned home. She looked exhausted. She loosened her jacket and dropped several thick binders onto the dining table. Jeremy poured her a cup of tea without asking. She accepted it gratefully. Long day. The longest. He sat across from her. You don't have to tell me about work. She smiled weakly. Thank you. After several minutes of silence, she quietly asked, Do you ever regret choosing teaching? Jeremy answered immediately. Never. She looked into her tea. I wish I could answer that quickly about everything. Before Jeremy could respond, her phone vibrated once again. She glanced at the screen. The message contained only 5 words. Federal subpoena request under review. Anna stared at the display. For the first time in years, genuine uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Without saying a word, she locked the phone and looked out into the Chicago night, realizing that whatever had begun inside Riverside Industrial Park was no longer staying there. The first official letter arrived on a gray Monday morning. It was delivered by overnight courier, marked confidential, addressed to Anna Whitmore. She opened it alone inside her office before the executive team arrived. The document contained only 4 pages. That was enough. The Illinois Environmental Protection Agency requested additional records regarding Riverside Industrial Park. Several supporting reports, internal correspondence, testing histories. The language remained professional. No accusations, no conclusions, just requests. Anna read the final page twice before placing it face down on her desk. She knew government agencies rarely asked for documents without a reason. Someone had pointed them toward Riverside. The question was who? At 9 o'clock, Michael Grant entered carrying the latest quarterly revenue report. One look at Anna's face told him something had changed. What happened? She handed him the letter. He read silently. When he reached the final page, he slowly exhaled. So it begins. Anna looked toward the window. Not necessarily. Michael placed the letter back onto the desk. They don't send requests like this randomly. I know. They've already spoken to someone. Neither of them said the obvious possibility aloud. A whistleblower. Inside the same building. Miles away, Jeremy stood before 28 high school students drawing free body diagrams across a whiteboard. Force isn't about intention, he explained. It's about interaction. One student raised his hand. So something can move, even if it doesn't want to. Jeremy smiled. Happens all the time. The class laughed. He erased part of the diagram. The important question isn't what starts motion. He paused. It's what happens after momentum builds. Those words would echo through his own life sooner than he realized. By lunchtime, Rachel Bennett had confirmed 2 additional facts. First, Harbor Ridge Holdings had acquired several parcels immediately adjacent to Riverside Industrial Park, only weeks before Whitmore Urban Dynamics announced its expansion. Second, those purchases had been completed through intermediaries that concealed the ultimate investors. She couldn't yet prove wrongdoing, but the pattern disturbed her. Property values around contaminated land often changed dramatically, depending on public disclosure. Someone could earn millions simply by knowing information before everyone else. Rachel requested another meeting with her editor. He studied her notes carefully. What do you have? Questions. I need more than questions. I know. What do you need? Rachel answered without hesitation. Someone inside the company. Back at Whitmore headquarters, rumors spread quietly through executive offices. Legal assistants whispered in hallways. Compliance officers requested archived files. Information technology staff recovered old backups. Nobody explained why. Everyone noticed. During lunch, Michael walked into the legal department. Daniel Harper had once been retained as outside counsel for several acquisition matters. Although he no longer represented Whitmore Urban Dynamics full-time, he remained familiar with the company's internal procedures. Michael closed the office door. I need your opinion. Daniel listened carefully as Michael summarized the document request. When he finished, Daniel remained silent for several moments. Finally, he asked, were the environmental reports complete? Michael chose his words carefully. The reports evolved. Daniel raised one eyebrow. That's not what I asked. No. Were investors shown every version? Michael looked away. No. Daniel leaned back. Then you need to prepare for more than regulatory questions. What do you mean? If investigators believe information was intentionally withheld, this becomes a legal problem. Michael already understood. Hearing someone else say it made everything feel heavier. That evening, Jeremy stopped at a neighborhood grocery store before heading home. The cashier recognized him. You're Mr. Reed. I am. My son had your physics class. I hope he enjoyed it. He talks about engineering now. Jeremy smiled warmly. He's very talented. The cashier looked embarrassed. You probably don't remember him. I remember every student who asks too many questions. She laughed. That sounds like him. Jeremy left carrying 2 paper bags. Ordinary groceries. Ordinary evening. Ordinary life. He had no idea newspaper reporters had begun searching public records connected to his wife. When he reached home, Anna was already there. She rarely arrived before him anymore. Tonight she sat alone in the living room without turning on any lights. Jeremy immediately noticed something was wrong. "You came home early." She nodded. "I needed to think." He placed the groceries in the kitchen before joining her. Neither spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Jeremy asked, "Do you want to talk?" Anna stared towards the dark city skyline. "Have you ever made a decision that couldn't be undone?" Jeremy considered the question. "Yes." She looked at him. "How did you know?" "I didn't." "So you were afraid?" "Very." "What happened?" Jeremy smiled faintly. "I kept moving anyway." Anna lowered her eyes. "I don't know if I chose correctly." Jeremy reached for her hand. "You don't have to solve everything tonight." She squeezed his fingers gently. "I wish it were that simple." Her phone rang. She looked at the display. Board chair. She declined the call. It rang again 30 seconds later. She declined it again. Jeremy had never seen her ignore work calls before. The silence between them carried more meaning than any conversation. Across the city, Rachel Bennett finally found the first person willing to speak. Not on the record, not publicly, but enough to move the investigation forward. The meeting occurred in an underground parking garage beneath an office building. The source remained inside a vehicle, with the windows only partially lowered. Rachel never saw the person's full face. "You received the files?" "I did." "They're genuine. Can you prove that—" "You will." The voice remained calm. "There are backup servers." "Where?" "I can't tell you." "Why contact me?" "Because nobody else listened." Rachel wrote nothing down. She simply listened. The source continued. "They changed reports." "Who?" "I can't answer that." "Were investors misled?" Long silence. Finally, the answer came. "They weren't told everything." The vehicle started. Rachel stepped forward. "Wait." The driver stopped briefly. "One more thing." "What?" "Watch the CFO." The car disappeared before Rachel could ask another question. She stood alone inside the parking garage, replaying the conversation. Watch the CFO. Was Michael Grant helping hide the truth or trying to stop it? The distinction could change everything. The following morning, Whitmore Urban Dynamics held its weekly executive meeting. Attendance felt unusually tense. Legal counsel summarized pending requests. Compliance teams reported ongoing document collection. Public relations recommended avoiding interviews. Then one board member asked the question everyone had been avoiding. "Should we notify shareholders?" Silence. Another director answered first. "Not yet." Michael disagreed. "If this expands, they'll accuse us of withholding information." Anna looked toward him. "We don't know that." "We also don't know the opposite." The room divided quietly. Some directors supported immediate disclosure. Others feared panic. Anna listened to every opinion without revealing her own. When everyone finally finished, she spoke. "We continue cooperating." She paused. "No public statement until we understand the scope." The motion passed. Barely. As executives left the conference room, Michael remained behind. "So that's it." Anna gathered her papers. "For now." "What if we're already too late?" She stopped walking. "For what?" Then, the truth." Anna looked directly into his eyes. "The truth depends on which facts survive." Michael watched her leave without another word. Those 7 words echoed inside his mind long after the door closed. The truth depends on which facts survive. For the first time in his professional life, he wondered whether loyalty to the company had slowly become disloyalty to himself. That afternoon, Rachel Bennett submitted the first draft of her investigation. Her editor read every page. No publication yet. I know. We still need confirmation. Rachel nodded. I'll get it. As she left his office, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Rachel Bennett. A calm voice spoke only one sentence. If you want proof, check tomorrow's board minutes before they're destroyed. The call disconnected immediately. Rachel looked at the silent phone in her hand. Someone inside Whitmore Urban Dynamics was risking everything. And tomorrow, someone else might decide exactly how much of the truth would remain alive. Rachel Bennett arrived outside Whitmore Urban Dynamics before sunrise. The city was still waking. Office towers reflected the first hints of morning light. Delivery trucks rolled through nearly empty streets. She remained inside her parked car with a camera, a notebook, and 2 cups of coffee that quickly grew cold. The anonymous caller had been specific. Check today's board minutes before they're destroyed. That meant someone expected records to disappear. Rachel intended to learn why. Inside the headquarters building, executive assistants prepared the conference room for another emergency board meeting. Fresh legal binders rested beside every chair. Coffee steamed from polished silver carafes. No one smiled. Anna entered exactly at 8. Michael Grant followed moments later carrying 3 thick folders. Several board members had barely slept. Their faces revealed it. The chairman opened the meeting without ceremony. We have 2 priorities. He looked around the table. Regulatory cooperation. Then toward the legal department. And document preservation. One director interrupted. Preservation. I thought we were already preserving everything. The company's general counsel answered carefully. We are. Another board member frowned. Then why discuss it? The attorney hesitated just long enough for everyone to notice. Because questions have been raised regarding historical document revisions. Silence settled over the room. Anna spoke calmly. Has anyone found evidence of unauthorized destruction? No. Unauthorized modifications? Not yet. Michael looked directly at the attorney. But you found missing records. The attorney met his eyes. We've found incomplete histories. There was an important legal distinction. Michael understood it immediately. Incomplete histories sounded less alarming than missing evidence, yet they could mean exactly the same thing. Outside the building, Rachel watched employees enter through the revolving doors. She recognized none of them. At 8:47 a.m., a man wearing a maintenance uniform exited the building carrying 2 locked recycling containers marked for confidential paper disposal. Rachel frowned. The timing seemed unusual. She photographed the containers as they were loaded into a secure shredding truck. Her instincts sharpened. If important board discussions had just begun, why were confidential documents already leaving the building? She followed the truck. Across town, Jeremy supervised his students during a laboratory experiment involving momentum and collisions. Pairs of steel carts rolled across smooth tracks. Students measured velocities, recorded data, compared predictions with reality. One student became frustrated. My calculations were perfect. Jeremy walked over. And the experiment? It disagreed. Jeremy smiled. Then the experiment wins. But I know my answer. He shook his head gently. No. You know your expectation. The student stared at the results. Jeremy continued. Evidence doesn't exist to protect our opinions. It exists to challenge them. Several nearby students quietly wrote those words into their notebooks. At Whitmore headquarters, the emergency meeting continued. Legal counsel projected timelines onto a large screen. Environmental testing, property acquisition, public disclosures. Every event appeared organized. Every date seemed reasonable. Until Michael raised one question. Where is version 3? The attorney looked confused. Version 3 of what? The Riverside Environmental Summary. We have the final version. And version 2. Michael pointed toward the screen. There should be another revision. The room grew noticeably quieter. The attorney searched through digital records. Nothing. Michael folded his arms. It existed. Anna looked toward him. Are you certain? I reviewed it personally. The attorney searched again. Still nothing. One board member whispered, Could it have been archived? The information technology director answered, No archive record exists. Michael slowly sat back. Someone hadn't simply misplaced a file. Someone had erased its existence. Meanwhile, Rachel continued following the shredding truck until it reached a secure destruction facility outside the city. She remained across the street with a telephoto lens. Employees unloaded locked containers. Most were emptied directly into industrial shredders. One container wasn't. Instead, it was rolled toward a side entrance. Rachel watched carefully. A man wearing business attire signed paperwork before taking possession of the entire container. Interesting. Very interesting. She photographed everything. License plates, faces, delivery times, building numbers. Nothing felt accidental. Back at school, Jeremy received an unexpected visitor. The principal knocked lightly on his classroom door during lunch. Do you have a minute? Of course. They stepped into the hallway. We've been offered a private donation. Jeremy looked surprised. For the science department. Specifically your robotics program. From whom? The donor requested anonymity. Jeremy smiled. Then please thank them. The principal laughed. I can't. Why not? I don't know who they are. The donation had arrived through an attorney's office, large enough to fund competitions for 3 years. Jeremy felt grateful. He never wondered whether the anonymous benefactor might be connected to his own hidden fortune. Margaret Collins had quietly ensured promising students never lacked opportunity for years, exactly as Thomas Reed had instructed before his death. No recognition, only results. Across the city, Anna ended the board meeting feeling exhausted. Directors left in small groups. Legal teams remained behind. Michael approached her before she reached her office. We need to talk. She nodded. Inside her office, he closed the door. This isn't just about Riverside anymore. I know. We're missing documents. We're looking. No. Michael spoke more firmly than ever before. Someone is removing history. Anna looked directly at him. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we conduct an independent investigation. She hesitated. Internally, No. Her expression changed. Outside investigators. Anna walked toward the window. If we do that, they may find things. They also may not. Michael answered quietly. If we don't, someone else will. Neither spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, Anna said, I'll think about it. Michael left without another word. He sensed time was running out. Rachel returned to the newsroom carrying hundreds of photographs. Her editor studied the images carefully. That's not a shredding service. No. What is it? I don't know yet. She enlarged one photograph. The businessman receiving the locked container. The editor leaned closer. I've seen him before. Where? Real estate conference. Rachel searched previous event photographs. Within minutes, she found him. Harbor Ridge Holdings, vice president of operations. The same company named in the anonymous email. Rachel's pulse quickened. The connection was no longer theoretical. Whitmore documents had somehow reached Harbor Ridge. But why she requested corporate ownership records again? This time she searched deeper. Layer after layer of limited liability companies appeared. Holding companies owned other holding companies. Trusts owned subsidiaries. Addresses repeated, names changed, patterns emerged. Late that evening, Daniel Harper received an unexpected call from Jeremy. "Are you busy?" "For you." "Never." Jeremy laughed softly. "I need advice." Daniel expected a legal question. Instead, Jeremy asked, "How do you know when someone carries too much alone?" Daniel smiled sadly. "You usually don't." "What if they refuse help?" "You stay close." Jeremy looked towards the apartment where Anna still hadn't returned from work. "I've tried." "Then keep trying." Daniel paused before asking, "Is this about Anna?" "Yes." "Business?" "I don't know." Daniel hesitated. He represented many corporations. Confidentiality mattered. But Jeremy was also his friend. "Tell her one thing." "What?" "Secrets become heavier every day they remain hidden." Jeremy quietly repeated the sentence. "Secrets become heavier every day." After hanging up, he waited on the apartment balcony until nearly midnight. When Anna finally arrived home, she looked more tired than he had ever seen. She forced a smile. "You're still awake." "I wanted to see you." She stepped closer. Without discussing business, without mentioning investigations, without explaining the fear behind her eyes, she simply rested her forehead against his shoulder. Jeremy wrapped his arms around her. Neither realized a photographer across the street had quietly captured the moment. The image would never appear in a newspaper, but someone else wanted proof that despite everything happening around Whitmore Urban Dynamics, Anna Whitmore still trusted exactly one person. And before the week ended, that single fact would become more valuable than millions of dollars in hidden property records. The photograph reached Richard Whitmore before sunrise. No return address, no note, only a single glossy print inside a plain white envelope. He examined it beneath the desk lamp in his private study. Anna stood on a balcony with her forehead resting against Jeremy's shoulder. Jeremy held her without speaking. The image revealed exhaustion instead of romance, fear instead of confidence. Richard studied it for several seconds before placing it beside his morning coffee. His assistant entered quietly. "You wanted the overnight reports," Richard nodded. "Any updates?" "The environmental inquiry continues." "And the press?" "They're asking more questions." Richard tapped the photograph with one finger. "They're asking the wrong ones." Meanwhile, Rachel Bennett returned to Harbor Ridge Holdings. This time she did not follow delivery trucks. She reviewed public property filings, tax records, construction permits, financing statements. A pattern slowly emerged. Harbor Ridge had repeatedly purchased land shortly before Whitmore Urban Dynamics announced nearby developments. The profits were remarkable, almost impossibly consistent. Rachel circled 6 separate transactions. Luck rarely repeated itself that many times. Someone had known exactly where future projects would appear. She leaned back in her chair. Either Harbor Ridge possessed extraordinary business instincts, or someone had supplied confidential information. At Whitmore headquarters, Anna convened another leadership meeting. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. People no longer discussed expansion. They discussed exposure. Compliance officers requested authority to preserve additional servers. Human resources delayed executive travel. Outside attorneys occupied temporary offices throughout the building. Anna listened carefully before speaking. "We continue cooperating fully." No one objected. Then Michael asked, "What about the internal review?" Anna looked toward him. "I've decided." Every eye turned in her direction. "We're hiring independent investigators." Several directors immediately protested. "That sends the wrong message. It implies guilt. Our shareholders will panic." Anna remained calm. "It implies confidence." She folded her hands. "If we've done nothing wrong, an independent review protects us." The room gradually quieted. Michael nodded once. For the first time in weeks, he felt they were moving toward honesty instead of away from it. Across town, Jeremy supervised an after-school robotics workshop. Students crowded around work tables covered with wires, gears, laptops, and unfinished machines. One freshman accidentally burned out a circuit board. "I'm sorry," Jeremy smiled. "What happened?" "I connected the battery backward." "So, what did you learn?" The boy looked embarrassed. "Check everything twice." Jeremy nodded. "And?" The student hesitated. "Failure usually costs less than pretending it didn't happen." Jeremy smiled broadly. "Excellent." Several students laughed. The damaged circuit board became another lesson instead of another mistake. Late that afternoon, Margaret Collins arrived unexpectedly at Jeremy's school. She rarely visited him in person. Teachers greeted her politely before directing her toward the science wing. Jeremy looked surprised. "Margaret, we need to talk." He immediately recognized the seriousness in her voice. They walked outside onto an empty athletic field. "What happened?" She handed him a sealed folder. "These are market summaries." Jeremy didn't open it. "I asked you not to involve me." "I know. Then why now?" "Because Reed Legacy Capital owns investments connected to several lenders financing Whitmore projects." Jeremy slowly looked up. "Indirectly." "Yes. If Whitmore collapses, our exposure increases." Jeremy remained silent. Margaret continued. "The trustees want guidance." "They already have it." "What guidance?" "We do nothing." She studied him carefully. "Even if losses become significant," Jeremy answered without hesitation. "We do nothing." "Because of Anna?" "No." He looked across the football field where students practiced under the afternoon sun. "Because companies deserve truth before rescue." Margaret smiled faintly. "Your grandfather would have said exactly that." She placed the folder back into her briefcase, unopened. The conversation ended there. Rachel finally received access to one additional corporate filing through a courthouse records request. The document appeared ordinary: property financing, transfer agreements, corporate guarantees, until she reached the final signature page. One signature belonged to Harbor Ridge, another belonged to Whitmore Urban Dynamics. The third signature had been redacted, completely blacked out. Rachel frowned. Court records rarely removed names without legal justification. She photographed every page. Her editor glanced over her shoulder. "Anything useful? Someone important? Can you identify them?" "Not yet." "But whoever signed this matters." The editor nodded. "Keep digging." At 6 o'clock, Michael Grant sat alone, reviewing archived emails. Thousands filled his inbox. He searched one phrase: executive summary. Hundreds appeared. Then another search: revision. Dozens. Finally, one phrase: version 3. Only one result remained. The email existed, but the attachment was gone. Deleted. Not corrupted. Not missing. Deleted. Michael stared at the empty attachment field. Someone had removed it after the email had already been sent. He immediately contacted the information technology director. "Can deleted attachments be recovered?" "Sometimes." "How long?" "It depends." "On what?" "Whether someone wanted them recovered." Michael understood exactly what that meant. Back home, Jeremy prepared dinner, while Anna answered another series of legal phone calls. She sounded calm, measured, professional. The moment she disconnected, however, she closed her eyes. Jeremy quietly placed a bowl of soup in front of her. She smiled weakly. "You always know." "I pay attention." She looked at the steam rising from the bowl. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "I've barely been here." "You've been here." She shook her head. "No." "I've only been physically present." Jeremy reached across the table. "You don't owe me perfection." She looked at him for several seconds. "Do you ever wonder why you married me?" He answered immediately. "No." "Never, never?" She laughed softly despite herself. "That's impossible." "It isn't. You don't even know what I was going to become." Jeremy smiled. "I knew who you already were." Anna lowered her eyes. His answer hurt, because she no longer felt certain she remained that person. Later that evening, Daniel Harper visited Michael's office after normal business hours. The building had nearly emptied. "I received your message." Michael closed the office door. "I found proof." "Of what?" "A deleted attachment." Daniel remained expressionless. "Can you recover it?" "I don't know." "Can investigators—" "Probably." Michael leaned against the desk. "If that file says what I think it says—" Daniel interrupted quietly. "Then stop guessing." Michael looked confused. "Find it." Silence filled the office. Daniel continued. "The worst decisions I've ever seen began with assumptions." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll keep looking." As Daniel prepared to leave, he stopped. "One more thing." "What?" "If you discover evidence of intentional concealment," he chose every word carefully, "your next decision will define the rest of your life." Michael remained alone long after Daniel departed. Those words echoed louder than any board meeting. Near midnight, Rachel received another encrypted message. No greeting, no signature, only one sentence. The deleted attachment still exists outside the company. Below it appeared a location: a public storage facility on the west side of Chicago. Locker 314. Rachel stared at the screen. Was it another trap? Or the breakthrough she had spent weeks searching for? She grabbed her keys. Across the city, Anna finally fell asleep on the living room sofa, with legal files scattered around her. Jeremy quietly covered her with a blanket before turning off the lights. As he stood there watching her sleep, he remembered the confident woman who had once believed every problem could be solved through determination alone. Now, for the first time since they had met, determination no longer seemed enough. Outside rain began falling across the city. And inside, an anonymous storage locker, waiting in the darkness, a single forgotten flash drive held the missing file that could either destroy Whitmore Urban Dynamics forever or finally reveal who had been manipulating the truth from the very beginning. Rachel Bennett left Columbus before dawn. The highway toward Chicago stretched beneath a pale gray sky. She replayed the anonymous message repeatedly. Locker 314, a public storage facility. The deleted attachment still exists outside the company. It sounded almost too convenient, too precise, yet every anonymous tip she had received so far had led somewhere meaningful. She decided this one deserved the same chance. By mid-morning, she reached the storage facility. It stood beside an aging industrial district, surrounded by chain-link fencing and faded warehouses. The office manager greeted her politely. "I'm looking for Locker 314. He smiled apologetically. "I can't provide renter information." "I'm not asking for names." "I'm sorry." Rachel thanked and walked outside. She studied the rows of metal doors stretching across the property. Locker 314 sat near the back corner. Closed, locked, ordinary. She photographed it from several angles before returning to her car. Waiting often produced answers that questions could not. 3 hours later, someone finally arrived. A woman wearing sunglasses stepped out of a silver sedan. She approached Locker 314 confidently, unlocked it, reached inside, removed a small cardboard box. Rachel quietly photographed every movement through a long camera lens. The woman never noticed. Instead of leaving immediately, however, she paused. She looked directly toward Rachel's parked vehicle. For one brief moment, Rachel wondered whether she had been discovered. Then the woman raised one hand. Not a wave, not a warning. Simply a gesture directing Rachel toward the locker. She closed the door, locked it again, returned to her car. and drove away without looking back. Rachel waited another 5 minutes before approaching. Something rested on the concrete floor beside the locker. A plain envelope. Her name was written across the front. Inside rested a single flash drive. No note, nothing else. She understood immediately. Someone wanted the evidence found. Back in Columbus, Anna prepared for the arrival of independent investigators. Conference rooms became temporary document centers. Archived files filled rolling carts. Employees answered detailed questionnaires. No one enjoyed the process, but refusing cooperation would only create additional suspicion. Michael met the lead investigator at the entrance, a woman named Claire Morrison, former federal prosecutor, known for refusing political pressure. She shook Michael's hand. "We appreciate your cooperation." "You'll have it." Claire looked directly at him. "I hope so." The simple reply carried enough weight to silence any attempt at casual conversation. Jeremy spent the afternoon judging a regional science fair. Students from several schools proudly displayed projects involving renewable energy robotics, chemistry, and astronomy. One young girl nervously demonstrated a homemade water purification system. "It isn't perfect," Jeremy smiled. "Nothing worthwhile is." She relaxed immediately. After explaining her project, she quietly admitted, "I almost didn't enter." "Why?" "I thought it wasn't good enough." Jeremy looked at the carefully assembled display. "Perfection never changes the world." "What does—" he answered without hesitation. "People willing to improve." She smiled so brightly that every hour Jeremy spent teaching suddenly felt worthwhile again. While awards were announced, his phone vibrated. A message from Anna. "Can we have dinner tonight? No phones, just us." Jeremy replied immediately. "Of course." Rachel returned to her hotel room in Chicago. She locked the door, closed every curtain, placed the flash drive into her laptop. Several folders appeared: emails, financial summaries, environmental reports, meeting notes, and one file labeled simply version 3 final.pdf. Rachel opened it. The document matched earlier environmental reports in almost every respect. Almost. One section highlighted groundwater contamination significantly exceeding later published figures. Another paragraph recommended delaying residential development until additional remediation could be completed. Those recommendations had vanished from later versions. Rachel continued reading. At the bottom appeared reviewer comments. Most involved technical revisions. One handwritten digital annotation froze her completely. "Remove before investor presentation. No signature, only initials." "R.W." Rachel stared silently. Richard Whitmore. If the initials represented him, everything changed. She immediately called her editor. "I found it." "Found what?" "The missing report." "Can you authenticate it?" "I'm sending it now." "No." Her editor's voice became firm. "Don't email anything." Rachel understood. If it's genuine, it becomes evidence. She carefully copied the files onto encrypted storage before leaving the hotel. Back in Columbus, Claire Morrison began interviewing executives individually. No lawyers. No group meetings. One person at a time. Michael entered first. Claire opened a notebook. "Mr. Grant." "Yes." "When did you first become aware environmental reports had multiple revisions?" Michael answered honestly. "Years ago." "Were revisions unusual?" "No." "Were deletions unusual?" He hesitated. "Sometimes." Claire noticed immediately. "Sometimes." Reports often became shorter. "Who decided what was removed?" "I don't always know." She wrote several notes before asking the next question. "Did you ever object?" Michael looked down. "Not strongly enough." The interview continued for nearly 2 hours. When Michael finally stepped outside, he looked years older. Anna waited nearby. "How did it go?" I told the truth. She nodded quietly. I think that's all any of us have left. That evening, Jeremy and Anna met at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant several neighborhoods away from downtown. No executives recognized them. No reporters waited outside. No one cared who they were. They ordered simple meals. For several minutes, they discussed nothing related to business. Students, books, travel, childhood memories. The conversation felt wonderfully ordinary. Finally, Anna sighed. I've missed this. So have I. She looked across the table. Do you ever regret marrying into all this? Jeremy smiled gently. I married you. You know what I mean. I do. And no. She studied his face. You never regret it. I regret seeing you unhappy. She lowered her eyes. I don't know how this ends. You don't have to. What if everything I've built disappears? Jeremy answered softly. Then we'll build something else. She laughed through tears. You make everything sound simple. No. He reached across the table. I make everything sound possible. Anna squeezed his hand tightly. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe the future might still exist beyond the crisis. Across the restaurant, however, another customer quietly photographed them with a phone hidden beneath the table. The image was immediately forwarded to an unknown recipient. The reply arrived seconds later. Continue surveillance. Meanwhile, Rachel drove back toward Columbus carrying the only known copy of version 3 outside corporate control. She remained alert. Twice, she noticed the same black SUV several miles behind her. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. She exited the highway unexpectedly. The SUV continued straight. Rachel relaxed slightly. Until 20 minutes later, she saw the same vehicle waiting at the next interchange. This time there was no doubt. Someone followed her. She accelerated carefully, never speeding enough to attract police, never slowing enough to become vulnerable. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again, then a third time. Finally, she answered using the speaker. Who is this? A calm, male voice spoke quietly. Don't go home. Rachel gripped the steering wheel tighter. Who are you? They know you found the drive. Her heartbeat quickened. Who knows? No answer came. Instead, the voice said one final sentence. Trust the teacher before you trust anyone else. The call disconnected. Rachel stared at the silent phone. The teacher, Jeremy Reed. She had interviewed dozens of executives, lawyers, regulators, board members, yet somehow an anonymous source believed the one person she barely knew might become the safest place to protect the evidence. Miles away, Jeremy and Anna walked slowly through the quiet evening after dinner. Neither realized that forces moving around them had finally begun to merge. The investigation, the missing report, the anonymous informants, the surveillance, the hidden fortune Jeremy had never revealed. All of them were now moving toward the same inevitable collision. And by the following morning, one unexpected knock on Jeremy's classroom door would begin changing every life connected to the Whitmore family forever. Jeremy arrived at school earlier than usual the following morning. The hallways were silent. Custodians polished the floors. Teachers organized lesson plans. Sunlight filtered through tall classroom windows, casting long rectangles across empty desks. He unlocked his classroom and began arranging laboratory equipment for the day's experiment on electrical resistance. Normal routines always brought him peace. Today felt no different, until someone knocked on the open classroom door. A woman stood outside holding a leather messenger bag. She looked tired from travel. You must be Mr. Reed. Jeremy nodded politely. I am. My name is Rachel Bennett. The name meant nothing to him. I'm a journalist. Jeremy smiled faintly. I usually don't make the news. No. Rachel stepped inside. But your wife does. His expression became more attentive. What can I help you with? She glanced toward the empty hallway. May we speak privately? Jeremy closed the classroom door. Rachel placed a small encrypted flash drive onto the teacher's desk. I was told to trust the teacher. Jeremy stared at the device. By whom? I don't know. She explained everything. The anonymous emails, Locker 314, the missing report, the surveillance, the mysterious phone call. Jeremy listened without interrupting. When she finished, silence lingered between them. Finally, he asked, Have you shown this to anyone else? My editor. Anyone connected to Whitmore? No. Jeremy looked at the flash drive again. You shouldn't have brought this here. I know. Why did you? Rachel answered honestly. Because whoever warned me believed you would protect the truth. Jeremy looked out the classroom window. Students were beginning to arrive. He made a decision. Wait here. He walked into the hallway and called Daniel Harper. Daniel answered immediately. Jeremy, I need you at my school. Is Anna all right? I don't know. What's happened? I'll explain when you get here. Within 30 minutes, Daniel arrived carrying a briefcase. Rachel repeated her story from the beginning. Daniel examined the flash drive carefully. You haven't connected this to the internet since receiving it? No. Good. He looked toward Jeremy. We need a forensic copy before anyone opens these files. Rachel nodded. I expected you'd say that. Daniel smiled slightly. You're smarter than most reporters. She returned the smile. I've had practice. Across downtown, Claire Morrison continued interviewing senior executives. Richard Whitmore entered her temporary office precisely on time. He wore an expensive navy suit. His confidence appeared untouched by the investigation. Claire gestured toward the chair opposite her. Thank you for coming. I had little choice. No. She opened a folder. You didn't. Richard folded his hands calmly. Claire asked routine questions first. Board procedures, oversight, committee responsibilities. Richard answered smoothly. Then she placed a printed document on the table. Have you seen this revision log before? His eyes moved across the page, barely, almost imperceptibly, but Claire noticed. No. She nodded. Interesting. Why? 3 witnesses already have. Richard remained silent. Claire continued. The log records edits made to the Riverside Environmental Summary. I don't remember reviewing it. You don't? No. Claire wrote another note. Memory failures often became surprisingly common during investigations. Meanwhile, Michael Grant worked alongside information technology specialists attempting to recover deleted archives. Hours passed. One technician finally looked up. I found something. Michael hurried over. What? Not the file. Then what? A deletion request. The technician enlarged system records. Someone with executive authorization had instructed the archive server to permanently overwrite one specific attachment. Michael leaned closer. Whose authorization? The technician hesitated. I need permission before I answer. Michael immediately contacted Claire Morrison. Within minutes, she arrived. The technician displayed the authorization record. No one spoke. The account belonged to Richard Whitmore. Claire quietly copied the information. This stays confidential. Everyone nodded. The investigation had crossed an invisible line. Back at school, Jeremy still taught every scheduled class. His students noticed nothing unusual. He demonstrated electrical circuits, asked questions, praised thoughtful answers. One student accidentally created a short circuit. The classroom lights flickered. Everyone laughed. Jeremy disconnected the power source. Mistakes are useful. A student grinned. As long as nothing catches fire. Exactly. The class continued. Yet throughout the lesson, Jeremy couldn't stop thinking about the flash drive locked inside Daniel's briefcase. Truth sometimes arrived quietly. Its consequences rarely did. Rachel spent the afternoon reviewing every article she had previously written about Whitmore urban dynamics. She highlighted assumptions, unsupported conclusions, questions she had ignored. One paragraph particularly bothered her. She had once described Richard Whitmore as a cautious executive who rarely interfered in technical decisions. Now she wasn't certain that statement had ever been true. Daniel returned to his law office with the encrypted evidence. His digital forensic consultant created verified copies without altering the original data. Every file matched Rachel's description. Version 3, meeting notes, internal comments. Then one additional folder appeared hidden inside the drive. Its title contained only a date. Daniel opened it carefully. Audio recordings, board meetings, private conversations. Someone had secretly recorded executives for months. He played the first file. Voices filled the office, routine discussions, budget reviews, nothing remarkable. Then another recording. A familiar voice spoke. Richard Whitmore. "We cannot delay the announcement." Another executive answered nervously. "The contamination numbers are worse." Richard responded immediately. "Investors don't finance hesitation." The recording ended. Daniel slowly leaned back. If authentic, the audio transformed the case, not because it proved guilt, but because it established knowledge. Knowledge changed everything. Late that afternoon, Anna visited Jeremy unexpectedly after school. Students had already left. She found him cleaning laboratory equipment. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You never interrupt." She smiled. "I needed to see you." He noticed the exhaustion beneath her smile. "How's the investigation?" She hesitated. "They're asking difficult questions?" "They should." "I know." She sat on the edge of a student desk. "For the first time." She stopped speaking. Jeremy waited patiently. "I'm afraid we may discover things none of us expected." He understood more than she realized. Yet he couldn't betray Rachel's confidence or Daniel's legal responsibility. So he answered carefully. "The truth isn't created by discovering it." She looked at him. "It already exists." Anna nodded slowly. "I keep telling myself that." Before leaving, she kissed his cheek. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being the one place that still feels honest." She walked away before he could answer. Jeremy watched her disappear down the hallway. His heart felt heavier than ever, because honesty was becoming increasingly difficult to protect. That evening, Claire Morrison assembled her investigative team. She placed several photographs and documents across the conference table. Richard's authorization log, missing revisions, recovered emails, witness statements. Each piece alone meant very little. Together they formed the outline of something much larger. Claire looked around the room. "We're missing one connection." An investigator asked, "What connection the original document?" She tapped the table. "Someone kept a copy." Another investigator nodded. "If they still have it?" Claire answered quietly. "I think they do." Hundreds of miles away, Daniel locked the original flash drive inside a secure evidence safe. He called Jeremy immediately. "The recordings are real enough to investigate." Jeremy closed his eyes. "And?" "They're dangerous." "For whom?" Daniel answered after a long pause. "For everyone." Outside Daniel's office building, a man sitting inside a dark sedan lowered a pair of binoculars. He made a brief phone call. "They have the drive," a calm voice replied from the other end. "Then Phase 2 begins tonight." The line disconnected. Above the quiet city, storm clouds gathered once again. No one yet realized that the investigation was no longer about recovering hidden evidence. It had become a race to determine who could protect it long enough for the truth to reach daylight before someone decided that silence was worth killing for. Jeremy barely slept that night. Rain tapped steadily against the bedroom windows while Anna slept beside him, exhausted after another endless day of interviews and legal reviews. He stared into the darkness. Only a few people knew about the evidence now. Rachel, Daniel, himself. Someone else already knew they possessed it. That realization refused to leave his mind. Before sunrise, Jeremy quietly slipped from bed. He brewed coffee without making noise. When Anna entered the kitchen 20 minutes later, she looked surprised. "You're awake early." "I couldn't sleep." She wrapped both hands around the warm mug he handed her. "Neither could I." For several moments, they simply watched the rain outside. Finally, Anna spoke. "I keep thinking about one question." Jeremy waited. "If investigators find something terrible..." She struggled to finish. "Does that erase everything good we've built?" Jeremy answered carefully. "No." She looked toward him. "It changes how people remember it." He paused. "But it doesn't change the truth that existed before." She smiled sadly. "You always separate people from their mistakes." "I try." Anna nodded. "I wish I had learned that earlier." At Whitmore headquarters, employees arrived under an increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. Reporters stood across the street. Television vans occupied nearby parking spaces. Security officers checked identification more carefully than ever before. Inside the executive floor, whispers replaced casual conversations. No one knew which rumors were true. No one trusted speculation. Claire Morrison continued assembling timelines. Every recovered email, every revision, every meeting, every authorization. The chronology slowly became clearer. The environmental report had changed several times. Important warnings disappeared. New summaries emphasized manageable risks instead of significant contamination. Someone had actively shaped the narrative. Claire still lacked one crucial answer. Who ordered the changes? Michael Grant knocked on her temporary office door. "I remembered something." Claire motioned him inside. "What is it?" "Years ago we held an emergency meeting after the first environmental review." "Were minutes recorded?" "No." "Why not?" Michael frowned. "We were told it was only an informal discussion." Claire immediately wrote the date down. "Who attended?" "Richard." "Myself." "The legal department?" "Anna." Claire looked up. "Anna?" Michael nodded. "But she left early." "Why?" "She had another investor meeting." "Did she participate in the discussions?" "Very little." Claire thanked him. One detail suddenly stood out. Anna might have been physically present. That did not necessarily mean she knew what happened after she left. Across town, Daniel met privately with his forensic consultant. The audio recordings continued revealing fragments of executive conversations. Most discussed ordinary business. Several contained references to project deadlines. Then another recording began. An unidentified executive asked, "What if regulators ask for the complete report?" Richard answered calmly, "They won't." "And if they do?" "We'll provide the latest version." Silence followed. Another voice quietly asked, "What about version 3? Richard replied without hesitation, "It no longer exists." Daniel stopped the recording. He looked toward the consultant. "Can you verify authenticity?" "The voices appear consistent." "Any evidence of editing?" "Not yet." Daniel nodded. "We need independent confirmation." Nothing could be rushed. Evidence strong enough to destroy a corporation demanded absolute certainty. Rachel spent the morning meeting with her editor inside a secured conference room. Printed documents covered the table. "We have enough to publish." Rachel shook her head. "No." Her editor looked surprised. Why not? Because enough isn't the same as complete. What are we missing? The person who preserved the evidence. Her editor leaned back. The anonymous source. Rachel nodded. They risked everything. If we publish too early, whoever helped us could be identified. The editor considered her words. Journalism required urgency. It also required responsibility. We wait. Rachel smiled gratefully. Just a little longer. Meanwhile, Jeremy taught a lesson about scientific observation. He placed 2 identical containers before his students. Describe what you see. Hands immediately rose. They're the same. Both contain water. Same size. Jeremy smiled. Now test your assumptions. Students measured temperatures, weights, electrical conductivity. One container held ordinary water. The other contained dissolved minerals invisible to the eye. The classroom buzzed with surprise. Jeremy wrote 1 sentence across the board. Evidence before conclusions. Several students copied it into their notebooks. Jeremy looked at the words for a long moment. He wished more adults remembered that lesson. Later that afternoon, Margaret Collins requested another meeting. They met inside a quiet botanical garden near the city center. She looked unusually concerned. The trustees are worried. Jeremy smiled faintly. They're always worried. This time it's different. She handed him financial summaries. Market analysts expect Whitmore stock to fall sharply if investigators announce formal findings. Jeremy glanced briefly at the documents before returning them. What do they want from me? They're asking whether Reed Legacy Capital should quietly purchase additional shares. Jeremy understood immediately. Buying shares now could eventually place Reed Legacy Capital in a controlling position. It would also generate enormous profits if the company survived. He shook his head. No. Margaret seemed unsurprised. You won't take advantage? No. What if another investment group does? Jeremy answered calmly. Then they do? Margaret studied him. You know this decision could cost hundreds of millions. Jeremy looked across the garden where children chased pigeons between flower beds. Money has never been the hardest thing to replace. She smiled softly. And trust. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. At Whitmore headquarters, Anna finally reviewed the list of interviews already completed. Her own name appeared near the end. Tomorrow. She stared at the schedule. No matter how many times she reminded herself she had nothing to hide, anxiety remained. Not because she feared questions, because she feared answers. Richard entered her office unexpectedly. You've been avoiding me. Anna closed the folder. I've been busy. We all have. He sat without invitation. You need to remember something. She waited silently. Companies survive crises by presenting confidence. Anna looked directly into his eyes. And truth, Richard's expression barely changed. Truth requires discipline. She frowned. I don't understand. You don't need to. He stood. Leave legal strategy to experienced people. After he left, Anna remained motionless. The conversation unsettled her. For years she had admired her father's certainty. Today it felt strangely rehearsed, as though confidence had become a substitute for honesty. That evening, Daniel called Jeremy. We finished reviewing every recording. And one voice appears repeatedly besides Richard. Can you identify it? We think so. Jeremy, the legal counsel who resigned 3 years ago. Jeremy remembered the name. Evelyn Brooks. She had disappeared from public business shortly after the Riverside acquisition. No one has spoken to her since, Daniel answered quietly. Not officially. Jeremy looked through his classroom window as sunset painted the sky orange. What if she's the missing witness? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Daniel paused. I've already hired investigators to find her. After the call ended, Jeremy remained alone inside the empty classroom. He remembered Anna mentioning Evelyn years earlier. Competent, quiet, highly respected. Then suddenly gone. At the same moment, several states away, a woman living under another name finished packing 2 small suitcases. Gray streaks touched her dark hair. She glanced repeatedly through the curtains before turning off every light inside the small, rented house. On the kitchen table rested an unopened newspaper featuring headlines about Whitmore urban dynamics. She whispered to herself, "It's finally happening." A car pulled into the driveway. She froze, then relaxed as an elderly neighbor stepped out carrying groceries. She waited until the vehicle disappeared before locking the front door behind her. Hidden inside one suitcase beneath folded clothes lay an old digital recorder, the final piece of evidence she had protected for 3 years. And as she quietly drove away into the gathering night, neither she nor the people searching for her realized that by the time the next sunrise arrived, the former legal counsel who had vanished without explanation would become the single most important witness in the battle over Whitmore urban dynamics, the Whitmore family, and the truth Jeremy had unknowingly been moving toward since the day he quietly signed a prenuptial agreement without revealing who he really was. The next morning began with a phone call that Daniel Harper had been expecting, but hoping would never come. His private investigator spoke without greeting. "We found Evelyn Brooks." Daniel immediately sat upright. "Where?" "Indiana." "Is she safe?" A brief silence answered before the investigator finally replied. "I don't know." "What does that mean?" "She left the rental house before dawn." "Did someone force her?" "There are no signs of that." Daniel picked up a pen. "Where is she now?" "We're following the trail." "Keep me updated every hour." He ended the call and immediately contacted Jeremy. "We located Evelyn." Jeremy stood alone in his classroom before students arrived. "That's good news?" "Maybe." Jeremy noticed the uncertainty. "What's wrong?" "She's already gone." "Gone?" "She disappeared before we reached her." Jeremy slowly looked toward the empty hallway. "If she's moving voluntarily, perhaps she's coming here." Daniel considered the possibility. "I hope you're right." Across Columbus, Anna entered Whitmore headquarters earlier than anyone else. She wanted one quiet hour before another exhausting day. Instead, she found Richard already sitting inside the executive conference room. Stacks of documents surrounded him. He looked strangely tired. "You're early," Anna said. "So are you." She poured herself coffee. "Couldn't sleep, Not much." Neither spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "Investigators will question you today." "I know." "Answer only what they ask." Anna frowned slightly. "I wasn't planning to lie." "I didn't say you should." His reply felt carefully measured. Anna looked directly at him. "Dad?" He raised his eyes. "If you know something I don't," Richard interrupted gently. "You've always trusted people too easily." Anna set down her coffee. "And you haven't trusted enough." Their eyes met. For the first time in years, father and daughter seemed to stand on opposite sides of an invisible line. Richard gathered his papers. "Good luck today." He walked away before she could continue. Meanwhile, Rachel Bennett drove toward Daniel's office carrying fresh notes from her continuing investigation. Traffic moved slowly beneath overcast skies. At a red light, she checked her rearview mirror. The same gray sedan had followed her for 3 intersections. Perhaps coincidence? She changed lanes unexpectedly. The sedan changed lanes. She exited the freeway. The sedan exited behind her. Rachel's heartbeat accelerated. She reached for her phone. "Daniel." He answered immediately. "Rachel. I think someone's following me." "Where are you?" She described her location. "Don't come here." "What?" "They may be watching the office." "What should I do?" Daniel thought quickly. Drive to Jeremy's school. Rachel laughed nervously. I'm becoming familiar with teachers. They're harder to predict than lawyers. She followed his instructions without asking more questions. At school, Jeremy finished his morning lesson. Students filed into the hallway discussing homework and weekend plans. One young boy remained behind. Mr. Reed. Yes. My parents are getting divorced. Jeremy quietly waited. I don't know whose fault it is. Jeremy pulled out a chair. Sit down. The student obeyed. I keep thinking maybe I should have done something. Jeremy shook his head gently. Adults make their own decisions. But they're angry all the time. I know. The boy lowered his head. Will it always feel like this? Jeremy answered honestly. No. How do you know? Because pain changes. It doesn't disappear overnight. But it changes. The student nodded slowly. Thank you. After he left, Jeremy remained seated for a moment. Teaching rarely involved only science. Sometimes the most important lessons never appeared inside textbooks. 20 minutes later, Rachel hurried into the school office. She looked over her shoulder repeatedly. Jeremy met her near the entrance. You look frightened. I was followed. Did you lose them? I think so. He guided her into his classroom. Minutes later, Daniel arrived through a side entrance. The three compared observations. Rachel described the gray sedan. Daniel immediately frowned. My investigator reported the same vehicle outside Evelyn's neighborhood. Jeremy looked toward him. The same people? Possibly. Rachel folded her arms. Whoever they are, they're moving faster. Daniel nodded. They know we're getting close. At that same hour, Claire Morrison finally interviewed Anna. The conference room contained only a recorder, notebooks, and 2 glasses of water. Claire began calmly. Please state your name. Anna Whitmore. Current position. Chief Executive Officer. Routine questions followed. Educational background, corporate responsibilities, board procedures. Then Claire reached the Riverside acquisition. When did you first review environmental reports? Anna answered carefully. Before acquisition. Did you read every version? No. Who summarized them? Our environmental consultants. Did you request deletions? No. Claire watched her closely. Did anyone else? Anna hesitated. I don't know. Claire placed a printed document on the table. Anna recognized the revision log immediately. I've never seen this. Claire believed her, not because of the words, because of the expression. Surprise rarely arrived on command. After another hour, the interview concluded. Anna stood. Am I under investigation? Claire answered honestly. Today, you're a witness. Anna nodded quietly. She wasn't certain whether that answer comforted her. Daniel's investigators called again shortly after noon. We found Evelyn's vehicle. Abandoned. Daniel's stomach tightened. Any signs of violence? No. What about her? Missing. He closed his eyes. The search had become even more urgent. Jeremy overheard enough to understand. Do you think someone took her? Daniel sighed. I don't know. Rachel stared at the flash drive lying between them. If she disappears permanently, Jeremy completed the thought. The truth becomes harder to prove. Nobody argued. Late that afternoon, Margaret Collins received unexpected visitors at Reed Legacy Capital. 3 senior trustees entered her office. One spoke first. We're concerned. So am I. This investigation is expanding. Margaret nodded. It is. Another trustee leaned forward. If Jeremy becomes publicly connected to this situation, our entire organization could receive unwanted attention. Margaret remained calm. What exactly are you suggesting? Reveal his identity now. She immediately shook her head. No. Why? Because Jeremy chose privacy. The situation has changed. Margaret answered firmly. Not enough. She had known Jeremy since childhood. If she exposed his secret without permission, she would betray decades of trust. The discussion ended without agreement. As evening approached, Anna drove home feeling emotionally exhausted. She expected to find Jeremy preparing dinner. Instead, she found him standing quietly on the back porch, watching rain clouds gather again. She joined him. Long day. He smiled faintly. You could say that. She leaned against the railing. I think Claire Morrison believes me. Do you? Anna looked confused. What do you mean? Do you believe yourself? She thought carefully before answering. I believe I never intentionally ignored the truth. Jeremy nodded slowly. Sometimes, intention matters. And sometimes consequences matter more. She stared into the distance. I don't know which frightens me more. Inside the house, Jeremy's phone vibrated. A text message appeared from an unknown number. She wants to surrender the recorder herself. Come alone. Below the message appeared an address. No signature, no explanation. Jeremy read it twice. Then a third time. Anna noticed the change in his expression. What's wrong? He locked the phone immediately. School matter. She accepted the explanation, though uncertainty remained in her eyes. Several miles away, inside an aging roadside motel, Evelyn Brooks sat alone on the edge of a narrow bed. The digital recorder rested in her hands. She had protected it for 3 years, long enough to watch innocent people blamed, long enough to watch guilty people continue living comfortably. She whispered into the silent room. No more. Outside her window, headlights slowly crossed the parking lot. One vehicle stopped, then another. Evelyn carefully looked through a narrow opening in the curtain. Neither car belonged to the police. Neither belonged to Daniel's investigators. Whoever had arrived had found her first. And within seconds, the quiet motel that had served as her hiding place for years was about to become the most dangerous location connected to the Whitmore investigation since the first anonymous flash drive had appeared. Evelyn Brooks did not panic. She had spent 3 years preparing for the moment someone finally found her. She quietly placed the digital recorder inside a weathered canvas shoulder bag before switching off the motel room lamp. Outside, 2 car doors closed almost simultaneously. Heavy footsteps crossed the wet pavement. She listened carefully. Not police. Police announced themselves. These people wanted silence. A sharp knock echoed through the room. Miss Brooks. No answer. Another knock. We only want to talk. Evelyn almost smiled. People who only wanted to talk rarely arrived with 2 vehicles after dark. She slipped into the bathroom and quietly opened the small window overlooking a narrow service alley. Rain had made the metal fire ladder slippery. She climbed through anyway. As another loud knock shook the motel door, Evelyn disappeared into the darkness behind the building. Across the city, Jeremy sat alone in his study. The anonymous text remained open on his phone. She wants to surrender the recorder herself. Come alone. He read the address again. Something felt wrong. If Evelyn truly wished to surrender the evidence, why contact him instead of Daniel? He immediately called Daniel. Don't go. Daniel answered before Jeremy spoke another word. I wasn't planning to. You received the message too? 5 minutes ago. Jeremy frowned. Exactly the same. Word for word. Silence settled between them. Then Jeremy quietly said, They're trying to separate us. I believe so. What about Rachel? I already warned her. Jeremy leaned back in his chair. So whoever sent those texts isn't Evelyn. No. Daniel paused. They know we're looking for her. Jeremy looked toward the living room where Anna quietly reviewed company documents without knowing any of this. "We're running out of time," Daniel agreed. So are they. Meanwhile, Rachel refused to remain safely inside her apartment. She sat in her car, reviewing every note she had collected over the past several weeks. Patterns slowly emerged. Anonymous emails, the flash drive, the phone calls, the hidden recordings. Someone inside the original Riverside operation had been systematically preserving evidence for years, not randomly, deliberately, professionally. She suddenly circled one name written in the corner of her notebook. Evelyn Brooks, legal counsel. If anyone understood how to preserve evidence without immediately exposing it, it would have been the company's own lawyer. Rachel immediately called Daniel. "I think Evelyn planned this long before she disappeared." "I've been thinking the same thing." "What if there are more copies?" Daniel stopped walking. "More copies. The recorder. The flash drive. The reports. Lawyers don't usually keep only one version of important evidence." Daniel slowly smiled. "You're thinking like an investigator now." "I've had good teachers." Across town, Claire Morrison remained inside her temporary office, reviewing interview transcripts. Anna's testimony, Michael's testimony, Richard's testimony. Small contradictions appeared everywhere. Nothing dramatic. Meeting times differed by minutes. Descriptions of conversations varied. Memories faded. One contradiction refused to leave her attention. Richard insisted version 3 no longer existed. Yet someone had clearly spent extraordinary effort attempting to destroy it. People rarely destroyed documents they genuinely believed were already gone. Claire wrote a single sentence across the top of her notebook. Someone knew the original survived. She underlined it twice. At Whitmore headquarters, Richard watched rain fall across the executive parking lot. His private phone vibrated. He answered immediately. "Report." A calm male voice responded. "We reached the motel." "And she escaped?" Richard remained perfectly still. "How?" "The back exit." "The recorder?" "We don't know." He closed his eyes briefly. "Find her." "We're trying." "No." Richard's voice became colder. "You will." The call ended. For the first time since the investigation began, Richard allowed frustration to show across his face. One witness, one recorder, one mistake. That was all it could take. Back at school the following morning, Jeremy attempted to focus on ordinary life once again. His students prepared for laboratory practical exams. Glass beakers reflected bright morning sunlight. Scientific instruments covered every workbench. One student raised a hand. "Mr. Reed." "Yes." "Why do scientists repeat experiments?" Jeremy smiled. "Excellent question." Several students looked up. "Because one observation isn't enough." He walked toward the whiteboard. "Anyone can be lucky once." He wrote 3 words. "Verification creates confidence." A girl near the front asked, "What if the results keep changing?" Jeremy answered, "Then you haven't discovered the truth yet." His own words lingered in his thoughts long after class ended. Verification. That was exactly what Daniel and Claire still needed. Not suspicions, not theories. Verified proof. Late that afternoon, Daniel's investigator called once more. "We found surveillance footage." Daniel immediately opened his laptop. "Send it." The grainy recording showed the rear alley behind the motel. Evelyn appeared climbing down the emergency ladder. She carried a canvas shoulder bag. Seconds later, she disappeared beyond the camera's view. Then another figure entered from the opposite direction. The image remained blurred, face hidden beneath a dark hood. The stranger stopped briefly beside a garbage container, bent down, picked up something, then hurried away. Daniel froze the frame. "What is that?" The investigator enlarged the image. A small metallic object reflected nearby light. The digital recorder, impossible to know, but perhaps something had been dropped during Evelyn's escape. Daniel immediately contacted local authorities requesting access to the location before weather destroyed remaining evidence. Meanwhile, Anna finally visited Michael Grant's office. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. "When did you last sleep?" Michael laughed weakly. "I don't remember." Anna closed the office door. "I need honesty." He looked directly at her. "You've always had it?" "No." She slowly shook her head. "I've had information." "Those aren't always the same." Michael remained silent. She continued. "Did you ever believe reports were being altered?" He hesitated longer than she expected. "At first, no. And later, I suspected." "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael's shoulders lowered. "Because I couldn't prove it." Anna whispered, "You should have tried." "I know." The weight of regret filled the room, not anger, not accusation. Simply two professionals realizing how many opportunities had quietly passed. That evening, Jeremy returned home to find Anna standing in the backyard. The rain had finally stopped. Clouds slowly separated, revealing the first clear sunset in days. He joined her. "It's beautiful." She nodded. "I almost forgot sunsets existed." They both laughed softly. The laughter faded quickly. Anna finally asked, "Jeremy?" "Yes." "If everything falls apart?" She struggled to continue. Will you still stay?" He turned toward her without hesitation. "I married you." She searched his face. "Even if I lose everything?" Jeremy reached for her hand. "You've never been everything I married." Her eyes filled with tears. She leaned against him in complete silence. Inside his jacket pocket, his phone vibrated once again. Another unknown number. This message contained only 6 words. She trusts only the physics teacher. Below the message appeared a photograph. Evelyn Brooks, alive, standing inside what looked like an abandoned railway station. The photograph had clearly been taken only minutes earlier. Jeremy immediately showed Daniel. Daniel studied the image carefully. "Look behind her." Jeremy enlarged the background. A faded station sign became barely visible through the shadows. Only 3 letters remained readable. Riv. Daniel looked up. "Riverside." Jeremy nodded slowly. "The old Riverside freight station." Rachel, already listening through a conference call, spoke immediately. "That's less than 15 minutes from the industrial park." No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Daniel closed his laptop. "This isn't random anymore." Jeremy agreed. No. For years, the abandoned railway station had stood forgotten beside the contaminated industrial property where the entire corporate disaster had quietly begun. Now, with investigators closing in, anonymous messages multiplying, and Evelyn apparently leading them back to the very place where the first environmental reports had originated, every path seemed to converge toward Riverside itself, where buried evidence, unfinished secrets, and people willing to protect them at any cost were waiting beneath the silence of abandoned tracks that had not carried a train in decades. Jeremy did not leave immediately. He studied the photograph again, enlarging every corner until the image became grainy. The cracked platform, the rusted rail, the faded station sign. Nothing appeared accidental. If Evelyn had truly wanted to disappear, she would never have stood beneath a recognizable landmark. Daniel noticed the same detail. "She's leaving us directions. Or someone wants us to believe she is." Jeremy nodded. "Either possibility is dangerous." Rachel leaned over Daniel's laptop. "The photograph has no timestamp." "No metadata either," Daniel replied. "It was stripped before being sent." Jeremy folded his arms. So we don't know whether this picture is 5 minutes old or 5 days old. The room fell silent. Evidence always mattered. Assumptions rarely survived. Daniel finally broke the silence. We don't go tonight. Rachel looked surprised. What if she's waiting? What if someone else is? Jeremy agreed. We prepare first. The decision frustrated everyone. But rushing toward uncertainty had already endangered too many people. Meanwhile, several miles away, Claire Morrison remained inside the temporary investigative office reviewing warehouse maps connected to the original Riverside acquisition. Most buildings had long since been demolished. Some had been renovated. One structure remained almost untouched: the abandoned freight station. Claire frowned. She searched the acquisition records again. The station had never officially belonged to Whitmore Urban Dynamics. It had remained under separate ownership. That struck her as unusual. Large redevelopment projects rarely ignored neighboring infrastructure. She circled the property on the map. Interesting. Her assistant entered, carrying another folder. Additional land records. Claire accepted them. Within minutes, another inconsistency appeared. 3 years earlier, someone had attempted to purchase the station through a small holding company. The purchase failed. The company dissolved only weeks later. Claire copied the company's name onto her notebook. Harbor Transit Holdings, not Harbor Ridge Holdings. Different name, different registration, same corporate address. She immediately understood. Another shell company. At Whitmore headquarters, Anna struggled to concentrate. Board members continued requesting updates. Investors demanded reassurance. Employees feared layoffs. Every conversation ended with uncertainty. Michael quietly entered her office. I received another request. From investigators. No. He handed her a printed letter. One of Whitmore's oldest institutional investors requested an independent review of executive decisions made during the Riverside acquisition. Anna slowly lowered the paper. They've lost confidence, Michael answered honestly. They've lost certainty. She looked toward the city skyline outside her office window. I always believed confidence came from results. And now I think it comes from trust. Michael nodded. They're not always the same. Later that evening, Jeremy drove home through steady traffic. His thoughts remained fixed on Riverside. At a red light, his phone rang. Margaret Collins. He answered immediately. Everything all right? I've been reviewing historical property records. Jeremy smiled faintly. So have we. Margaret sounded surprised. You already know? Know what? There was another buyer interested in the old freight station. Jeremy slowed the car. Tell me. The offer came from a company that no longer exists. Jeremy waited. It shared directors with Harbor Ridge Holdings. Jeremy closed his eyes briefly. That confirms our suspicion. It confirms something. Margaret paused. But not enough. She always insisted on precision. Jeremy appreciated that. I'll keep you informed. Please do. Before ending the call, Margaret quietly added, and Jeremy. Yes. Be careful. I will. She remained silent another second. I've watched powerful people panic before. They become unpredictable. Jeremy understood. The warning carried weight because it came from experience rather than fear. That night, Daniel assembled a small planning meeting inside his office. Only 4 people attended: Jeremy, Rachel, Daniel, his senior investigator, Marcus Hale. Marcus spread aerial photographs across the conference table. The freight station has 4 entrances. He pointed carefully. Main platform. Service tunnel. Maintenance road. Collapsed eastern stairway. Rachel studied the photographs. When was the last inspection? Nearly 2 years ago. Jeremy asked. Utilities. Disconnected. Security cameras. None that belonged to the property. Daniel looked toward Marcus. What about surrounding businesses? Mostly abandoned warehouses. Jeremy quietly observed the map. Too many blind spots. Too many places for someone to hide. We enter during daylight. Daniel nodded. Agreed. Marcus added, and only after local authorities know where we are. Rachel smiled. I see lawyers really do learn caution. Daniel answered, usually after expensive mistakes. Across the state line, Evelyn Brooks rested inside a small roadside diner. She wore an old baseball cap pulled low across her face. A newspaper lay folded beside untouched coffee. The waitress approached. Need anything else? Evelyn smiled politely. No, thank you. After the waitress walked away, Evelyn opened the newspaper. Every major headline discussed Whitmore urban dynamics. She quietly sighed. 3 years of silence had accomplished less than 3 weeks of investigation. Perhaps that was always inevitable. She reached into her shoulder bag and removed a worn envelope. Inside rested several handwritten pages. Not legal documents. Personal notes, dates, names. Private observations made immediately after confidential meetings. No official letterhead, no signatures, only memory preserved before it faded. She whispered softly, This should have happened sooner. Outside the diner, a dark SUV slowed without stopping. It continued down the highway. Evelyn noticed. She folded the notes immediately and returned them to her bag. She no longer believed in coincidences. Back in Columbus, Jeremy found Anna reading alone in the living room. She looked exhausted. He sat beside her. You should sleep. She laughed quietly. I forgot how. Jeremy gently took the folder from her hands. One night won't solve everything. I know. She leaned back against the sofa. I've been thinking about something. What? The prenup. Jeremy smiled. That surprises me. I thought it protected my future. She stared toward the darkened fireplace. Maybe all it protected was my fear? Jeremy remained silent. She continued. I spent years believing success depended on controlling every possible risk. And now, I finally understand. She looked toward him. Some things worth having can't be protected by contracts. Jeremy squeezed her hand gently. She still had no idea who he truly was. Yet every conversation slowly brought them closer to understanding each other. Not through wealth, not through power, through honesty. Elsewhere, Richard Whitmore entered his private office after everyone else had left headquarters. He unlocked a cabinet hidden behind framed architectural awards. Inside rested several old project binders. He removed one labeled Riverside Development. For several minutes, he quietly examined the contents. Then he removed a single sealed envelope hidden inside the back cover. No title, no markings. He stared at it without opening it. His phone vibrated. The same unknown operative spoke. We haven't located Brooks, Richard answered coldly. You will. We're trying. No. His voice became almost emotionless. You're failing. He ended the call before hearing another reply. For the first time in many years, Richard looked genuinely uncertain, not frightened, not defeated, simply aware that events were no longer following his plans. Near midnight, Daniel received an email from Claire Morrison. Only one sentence appeared. I found another shell company connected to Riverside. Attached beneath the message was the incorporation file. Daniel immediately forwarded it to Jeremy. Jeremy opened the attachment. The list of corporate officers contained mostly unfamiliar names. Then he reached the final page. One signature caught his attention. Not Richard Whitmore, not Michael Grant, not Evelyn Brooks. A corporate secretary whose name had never appeared anywhere else in the investigation. Laura Bennett. Jeremy stared at the screen. Rachel, who had been reviewing documents beside him, suddenly stopped breathing for a moment. That's impossible. Jeremy looked at her. You know her. Rachel slowly nodded her expression, turning pale. She was my mother. Neither of them spoke again, as the realization settled between them, because if Rachel Bennett's mother had quietly served as corporate secretary for one of the hidden companies connected to Riverside years before disappearing from corporate records without explanation, then Rachel's investigation had never been merely the work of an ambitious journalist searching for the truth, but the continuation of a story that had already begun inside her own family long before the anonymous flash drive ever arrived. Sometimes the greatest battles in life are not fought in courtrooms, boardrooms, or public headlines. They are fought quietly within our own hearts. This story reminds us that integrity is worth more than wealth. Truth is so stronger than deception, and genuine love cannot be measured by status, contracts, or appearances. Money can build success, but only character can build trust. Titles may earn respect, but kindness earns loyalty. And while lies may seem powerful for a season, the truth has a remarkable way of finding its voice when the time is right. We all face moments when taking the easy path feels tempting, yet real courage is choosing honesty even when it costs us something, standing by the people we love when circumstances change, and refusing to let fear define our decisions. In the end, our legacy is not determined by what we own, but by the lives we touch and the principles we refuse to compromise. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone in your own life, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below. Your perspective may encourage someone else who needs it today. And if you enjoy meaningful stories filled with emotion, life lessons, and unforgettable twists, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next inspiring journey. Thank you for watching.